A homeless pregnant woman saves a little girl from accident, unaware she is a billionaire heir. It happened on an ordinary afternoon, the kind people forget as soon as it passes. Cars rolled by. Store windows reflected silent faces. Everyone walking fast, eyes lowered, minds somewhere else. But then a little girl's balloon slipped from her hand. Bright red, floating into the street like a drop of color fleeing the world. The child ran after it, and the world froze. A pregnant woman, clothes frayed, hair tangled by the wind, someone the city had long stopped seeing, stepped into the road without hesitation. No shoes. No thought of her own safety. Just instinct. Just love. Tires screamed. A horn split the air. There was a gasp and then silence. On that sidewalk 2 lives changed. And a story began that none of them were prepared for. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Her name was Mara, 26 years old, 8 months pregnant, and invisible to the world. But why was she alone? Where was her family? Who had abandoned her at the moment she needed love the most? And why did the man who rushed to the little girl's side look at Mara as though she was a threat? Who was he? And what secret did he carry? Every story has a beginning, long before the moment the world noticed her. Before the shelter walls. Before the cold nights under the bridge. Mara had been a nursing student. Books stacked on her desk. Dreams of healing people. Dreams of making her mother proud. But when her mother passed away from cancer during Mara's second year of college, the world tilted. Grief became her companion. And in that grief she found him. A man whose voice sounded like comfort. Whose promises felt like shelter. His name was Onye. He worked construction. Had rough hands and an easy smile. Told her she was beautiful when she felt broken. Told her they would build something together. And for 2 years Mara believed him. Before the whispers behind her back, Mara was in love. Not a foolish love. Not a reckless love. A hopeful love. The kind that makes the world look warm. She trusted him. Believed his promises. Believed his hands were safe. She dropped out of school to work double shifts at a diner, saving money for their future. For the home they would share. For the life they would create. But when she missed her cycle and the test showed 2 pink lines, Andre's face changed. He did not smile. The warmth drained from his eyes. He told her he was not ready. Told her she should have been more careful. Told her he needed time to think. And then he disappeared. Blocked her number. Moved out of the apartment they shared. Left her with rent she could not pay and a future she could not see. Mara tried reaching out to her aunt in Baltimore. Her only living relative. The woman who had raised her after her mother died. But when Mara called and explained her situation, the aunt's voice turned cold. She said Mara had shamed the family. Said she should have known better. Said she could not help someone who made such foolish choices. The line went dead. And Mara stood alone in that empty apartment. One hand on her belly, tears falling onto the eviction letter in her hands. That was 6 months ago. Since then, Mara had slept in bus stations, shelters, and once in the storage room of a church that let her stay in exchange for cleaning. She ate when she could. Walked when she had to. And every night, she whispered to her unborn child that everything would be okay. Even when she did not believe it herself. By the time she arrived in Philadelphia, Mara was 8 months pregnant. Her feet were swollen. Her back ached constantly. She had $15 in her pocket and a jacket she had found in a donation bin. The baby kicked often now. Strong, insistent kicks that reminded her she was not alone. That someone needed her. That she had to keep going. She spent her days near Rittenhouse Square, sitting on a bench, watching people pass. Some dropped coins into her cup. Most looked away. A few muttered things under their breath. Things she pretended not to hear. She just sat. Existed. Waited for something to change. And prayed that when the baby came, she would find a way to give her child the life she never had. The little girl's name was Alina. 5 years old. Bright as morning. Her father, Charles Beaumont, was a man with power, wealth, and reputation. More enemies than he would ever admit. More secrets than he would ever confess. That afternoon, Charles had taken Alina to the square for ice cream. A rare moment of normalcy in a life consumed by boardrooms and legal battles. Alina wore a yellow dress and held a red balloon. Her laughter rang out like music in a world that had forgotten how to sing. Charles turned for just a second. Just 1 second. To answer a call from his attorney. A second that felt like nothing. A second that became everything. The balloon slipped from Alina's fingers. Floated toward the street. And without thinking, without fear, the child ran after it. Mara saw it happen before anyone else did. Maybe because she had been watching the little girl for the past 10 minutes. Watching the way she skipped. The way her father smiled at her. The way love looked when it was whole. Mara saw the balloon lift. Saw the child's eyes widen. Saw her little legs start running. And Mara moved. She did not think about her swollen belly. Did not think about the pain in her legs. Did not think about the truck barreling down the street at 40 miles per hour. She just ran. Faster than she thought possible. And when her hands reached Alina, she shoved the child backward with everything she had. The little girl tumbled onto the sidewalk. Safe. Stunned. Crying. But Mara was not fast enough to save herself. The truck's bumper clipped her side. Not hard enough to kill. But hard enough to send her sprawling onto the asphalt. Hard enough to knock the breath from her lungs. Hard enough to make the world go white. She lay there, gasping, one hand instinctively covering her stomach. And the first thought that entered her mind was not about herself. It was about the baby. Please God. Please let the baby be okay. Charles dropped his phone. The attorney's voice continued talking into the void as Charles sprinted toward his daughter. He scooped Alina into his arms, checking her for injuries, whispering frantic reassurances. She clung to him, sobbing, unhurt except for a scraped knee. It took him a full 30 seconds to notice Mara lying in the street. When he did, his face twisted with something between gratitude and suspicion. He barked orders at bystanders. Someone call an ambulance. Someone get help. But when he looked at Mara, really looked at her, he saw the torn clothes, the bare feet, the belly, and his expression hardened. People like Charles Beaumont did not trust easily. Could not afford to. In his world, kindness always came with a price. Heroism was often a prelude to extortion. And strangers who saved your child were sometimes the same ones who orchestrated the danger in the first place. So even as the ambulance arrived, even as paramedics lifted Mara onto a stretcher, Charles stood apart. Watching. Calculating. Wondering what this woman would ask for when she woke up. But Alina would not let go of Mara's hand. She cried when the paramedics tried to separate them. Screamed that the lady saved her. That the lady was hurt because of her. And something in that child's desperation made Charles hesitate. He climbed into the ambulance with them. Told the paramedics he would cover all medical costs. And as the vehicle sped toward the hospital, he watched Mara's face. Pale. Bruised. Peaceful in unconsciousness. And for the first time in years, Charles Beaumont did not know what to think. At the hospital, doctors examined Mara immediately. The baby's heartbeat was strong. No signs of trauma. Mara had fractured her wrist and bruised several ribs, but the pregnancy remained stable. A miracle, the attending physician said. Given the circumstances, a genuine miracle. Mara woke 3 hours later in a private room she did not recognize. The walls were cream-colored. The sheets were soft. Sunlight filtered through blinds. For a moment she thought she was dreaming. That this was the life she should have had. But then the pain in her wrist reminded her otherwise. A nurse entered and smiled warmly. Told her she was lucky. Told her the baby was fine. Told her someone had been waiting to speak with her. And before Mara could ask who, Charles Beaumont walked into the room. He stood at the foot of her bed. Tall. Sharply dressed. Expression unreadable. Alina stood beside him, holding his hand, her eyes red from crying. Charles spoke first. His voice was measured. Professional. He thanked Mara for saving his daughter. Said he would cover all her medical expenses. Asked if there was anyone he could call for her. Family. Friends. Anyone. Mara shook her head. Said she had no one. And something in the way she said it, with no bitterness, no self-pity, just quiet truth, made Charles pause. Alina pulled away from her father and approached Mara's bedside. She whispered that she was sorry. That she did not mean for Mara to get hurt. And then she did something neither adult expected. She climbed onto the bed, carefully avoiding Mara's injured wrist, and rested her head on Mara's shoulder. Mara's eyes filled with tears. She had not been touched with kindness in so long. Had not felt the weight of another human choosing to be close to her. And in that moment she broke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly. The way people break when they have been strong for too long. If this story has your heart already, comment, I'm still watching. Let us know you are walking this journey with us. And subscribe. Charles told Mara she could stay at the hospital as long as she needed. That he would ensure she had everything required for her recovery. But he also made it clear this was a temporary arrangement. A gesture of gratitude. Nothing more. Mara accepted. She had no other choice. And for the next 3 days she remained in that private room, eating meals she had not paid for, sleeping in a bed that felt like a dream. Nurses checked on her regularly. Doctors monitored the baby. And every evening, Charles brought Alina to visit. The little girl had become attached, drew pictures for her, brought her flowers from the hospital gift shop. And every time Alina smiled at her, Mara felt something inside her chest crack open. A longing she had tried to bury. A hope she had tried to kill. Charles watched these interactions with growing unease. Not because he distrusted Mara anymore, but because he saw how much his daughter loved her. And love, in his experience, always led to loss. His wife, Alina's mother, had died 3 years ago. A car accident on a rainy night. One moment she was alive. The next she was gone. And Charles had spent every day since then building walls around his heart. Around his daughter. Around their life. Because if you did not let anyone in, you could not lose them. But Alina was tearing those walls down. And Mara, without even trying, was stepping through the cracks. On the 4th day, a social worker visited Mara. A kind woman named Patricia who explained that Mara would be discharged soon. That she needed a plan. A place to go. Patricia offered to connect her with a shelter that specialized in pregnant women. A place with resources. With support. Mara nodded. Said thank you. But inside her heart sank. She knew what shelters were like. Crowded. Chaotic. Rules that felt like chains. And the thought of bringing her baby into that world made her want to weep. That evening, Charles arrived without Alina. Said his mother was watching her. He sat in the chair beside Mara's bed and studied her for a long moment. Then he asked a question that surprised them both. He asked what her plans were. Not just for the next few days, but for the future. For the baby. For her life. Mara hesitated. Then she told him the truth. That she had no plans. No home. No job. No family. That she was doing the best she could with what she had. And that sometimes, the best you can do is just survive another day. Charles listened. Did not interrupt. Did not judge. And when she finished, he made an offer that Mara did not see coming. He said his mother lived with him. That their home was large. That they had staff. That his mother had been struggling with loneliness since his wife passed. And that Alina needed stability. Needed someone who could be present in ways he could not always manage. He offered Mara a position. Not as a nanny. Not as a maid. But as a companion to his mother. Someone to keep her company. Help with light tasks. Be a presence in the home. In exchange, Mara would have a room. Meals. Medical care for herself and the baby. And a salary. Mara stared at him. Certain she had misheard. But Charles repeated the offer. Said it was not charity. That his mother genuinely needed help. That this arrangement would benefit everyone. Still Mara hesitated. Asked why he would do this. Why he would trust her. A stranger. Someone who had nothing. Charles looked away. Struggled to find the words. Then he said that Alina had not smiled like this since her mother died. That whatever Mara had done in those brief moments on the sidewalk, in that hospital room, had brought light back into his daughter's eyes. And he could not take that away from her. Could not take Mara away from her. But there was something else in his voice. Something he did not say. A fear that if he let Mara walk out of that hospital and back onto the streets, he would never forgive himself. That he would see her face every time he looked at his daughter. And the weight of that guilt would destroy him. Mara agreed. Not because she believed she deserved it, but because she had run out of options. And because a small part of her, the part that still remembered hope, whispered that maybe this was the chance she had been praying for. 2 days later, Mara was discharged. Charles sent a car to pick her up. Not a limousine. Just a simple black sedan with a driver who smiled and opened the door for her. Mara climbed inside, her fractured wrist in a cast, her belly heavy, her heart racing. The drive took 30 minutes. They left the city behind and entered a neighborhood Mara had only seen in magazines. Tree-lined streets. Mansions set back from the road. Gates that opened automatically. And when the car pulled up to Charles Beaumont's home, Mara's breath caught. It was not a house. It was an estate. Brick and stone and glass. Gardens that looked like paintings. A fountain in the circular driveway. The kind of place that whispered wealth in every corner. Mara felt herself shrinking. Felt the weight of her torn jacket and second-hand clothes. Felt like an intruder in a world that was never meant for her. But then the front door opened. And Alina came running out, arms wide, face glowing. She threw herself at Mara, careful of her belly, and hugged her so tightly Mara thought she might break. Behind Alina stood an older woman. Tall. Elegant. Gray hair pulled back into a neat bun. She wore a lavender dress and pearls. Her expression was warm but cautious. This was Evelyn Beaumont, Charles's mother. Evelyn approached slowly, extended her hand, said she had heard a great deal about Mara, that she was grateful for what Mara had done, that she looked forward to getting to know her. Mara shook her hand, tried to smile, tried to believe this was real. Charles stood in the doorway watching, and for the first time since his wife died, he wondered if he had made the right decision, or if he had just invited chaos into the fragile peace he had built. The first week was strange. Mara moved through the house like a ghost, afraid to touch anything, afraid to speak too loudly, afraid that at any moment, someone would realize they had made a mistake and send her away. Her room was on the second floor, large, bright, with a bathroom attached and a closet bigger than any apartment she had ever lived in. Evelyn had filled the closet with maternity clothes, soft fabrics, neutral colors, every dress comfortable and nice. Evelyn was kind but distant at first. She asked Mara questions about her pregnancy, her health, her plans for the baby. But she did not ask about Mara's past, did not pry into the circumstances that had led her to that street corner. And Mara was grateful for that silence. Alina, however, was relentless. She followed Mara everywhere, helped her unpack, showed her every room in the house, introduced her to the staff, the housekeeper Rosa, the cook Leonard, the groundskeeper Samuel. All of them treated Mara with polite respect. But Mara could see the questions in their eyes, the uncertainty, the curiosity about who she was and why she was there. Charles kept his distance. He left early for work and returned late. When he was home, he spent time with Alina but barely spoke to Mara. She understood. This was his way of maintaining control, of keeping boundaries, and Mara did not push. But Evelyn began to soften. She invited Mara to have tea with her in the afternoons. They sat in the sunroom, surrounded by plants and light, and talked about small things. Books, weather, memories of Philadelphia from decades ago. Evelyn told stories about Charles as a boy, how serious he had always been, how much he had loved his wife, how lost he had been when she died. Mara listened, learned, and slowly she began to understand the grief that filled this house, the way loss had shaped every person in it. One evening, 3 weeks after Mara arrived, Evelyn asked her to stay for dinner. Not in her room, but at the table with the family. Mara hesitated, said she did not want to intrude, but Evelyn insisted. So Mara came downstairs, sat at the long dining table across from Charles. Alina sat beside her, bouncing with excitement, and for the first time they ate together as something resembling a family. Charles asked Mara how she was feeling. The baby was doing well. Mara answered carefully, briefly, but Alina filled the silence with chatter. Told her father about everything she and Mara had done that day, how Mara had read to her, how Mara had taught her to fold paper cranes, how Mara had promised to let her help when the baby came. Charles listened, nodded, and for a moment, Mara saw something flicker in his eyes, something that looked like gratitude, or maybe regret. After dinner, Mara excused herself and went back to her room. She stood by the window looking out at the gardens below, one hand on her belly. The baby kicked, strong, alive, and Mara whispered a promise, that no matter what happened she would give this child a life worth living. But downstairs in Charles's study, a conversation was happening that Mara knew nothing about. Evelyn had followed her son into the room, closed the door behind her, and when Charles turned to face her, she said the words he had been avoiding. She told him Mara was not a stranger, not anymore, that she had been watching the way Mara moved through their home, the way she carried herself with quiet dignity despite everything she had endured, the way she loved Alina without asking for anything in return. And Evelyn said something that made Charles's chest tighten. She said Mara reminded her of his wife, not in appearance, not in background, but in spirit, in strength, in the way she gave without expecting, in the way she saw people, truly saw them even when they tried to hide. Charles shook his head, said this was different, that his mother was projecting, that Mara was here because of circumstance, because of obligation, not because she belonged. But Evelyn placed a hand on her son's shoulder, looked him in the eye, and told him something she had been holding inside for 3 years. She said she knew why he had offered Mara this position, that it was not just about Alina, not just about gratitude. It was about the guilt he carried every day since his wife died, the guilt of not being there when the accident happened, of not answering her call because he was in a meeting, of not saying I love you that morning because he was rushing out the door. Charles tried to turn away, but Evelyn would not let him. She told him that saving Mara would not bring his wife back, that no amount of generosity or control could erase what he had lost. but that if he kept building walls, if he kept pushing people away, he would lose Alina too. Not to death, but to distance, to the cold silence he had wrapped around his heart. Charles said nothing, but his hands shook, and when Evelyn left the room, he sat alone in the dark, staring at a photograph of his wife on the desk, and let himself cry for the first time in 2 years. Upstairs, Mara felt a sudden sharp pain in her abdomen. She gasped, sat down on the edge of the bed. The pain passed, but it left her shaken. The baby was coming soon, and Mara realized with a clarity that stole her breath that she was terrified, not of the birth itself, but of what came after, of the responsibility, of the possibility that she would fail, that she would become the kind of mother who could not protect her child, who could not give them the life they deserved. She lay down, closed her eyes, and for the first time in months she let herself cry too. What would you do if you were Mara? If the world had broken you? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Mara went into labor. 4 weeks after she arrived at the Beaumont estate, the contractions started at dawn. Slow at first, then faster, sharper. Evelyn heard Mara cry out and rushed to her room. She found Mara sitting on the floor, gripping the bedpost, breathing hard. Evelyn did not panic. She had done this before. Raised a son. Held her daughter-in-law's hand through Alina's birth. She knew what to do. She called for Charles. Called for the car. And within 10 minutes, they were on their way to the hospital. Charles drove. Evelyn sat in the back with Mara, holding her hand, whispering reassurances. And Mara, in the midst of her pain, felt something she had not felt in a long time. She felt held, supported, not alone. Alina stayed home with Rosa. She cried when they left, wanted to go with them. But Charles promised her they would bring the baby home soon, that she would meet her new friend. And Alina believed him. The labor lasted 8 hours. Long, exhausting, but uncomplicated. And when the baby finally came, when Mara heard that first cry, she felt her entire world shift. A girl, tiny, perfect, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. Mara held her daughter against her chest and sobbed, not from pain, but from relief, from love, from the overwhelming realization that she had created life. That despite everything, despite the abandonment and the fear and the nights spent wondering if she would survive, she had brought this beautiful soul into the world. Evelyn stood beside the bed, tears streaming down her face. She reached out and gently touched the baby's head, whispered that she was beautiful, that Mara had done so well. And in that moment, Mara understood something she had not expected. Evelyn was not just being kind. She was not just fulfilling an obligation. She genuinely cared. Genuinely wanted to be part of this. Charles arrived an hour later. He had been on a call with his attorney when the baby was born. But when he walked into the hospital room and saw Mara holding her daughter, saw the exhaustion and joy on her face, something inside him cracked. He approached slowly, asked if he could see the baby. Mara nodded. And when Charles looked down at that tiny face, he thought of his wife, of Alina, of how fragile life was, how quickly it could be taken, how desperately it needed to be protected. He told Mara she had done something incredible, that he was proud of her. And Mara, surprised by the sincerity in his voice, thanked him. They brought the baby home 3 days later. Alina was waiting at the door, bouncing, squealing, demanding to see the baby immediately. And when Mara placed her daughter in Alina's arms, carefully, gently, the little girl stared down in wonder. She whispered that the baby was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen, that she would protect her forever, that they would be best friends. And Mara believed her. The weeks that followed were chaotic. Sleepless nights, endless feedings. The baby cried often, needed constant attention. But Mara was not alone. Evelyn helped. Rosa helped. Even Leonard, the cook, brought meals to Mara's room so she would not have to come downstairs. And Alina was always there, reading to the baby, singing to her, holding her hand while she slept. The two of them, 5 years apart, already inseparable. Charles watched from a distance, still hesitant, still guarded. But something was changing in him too. He found himself coming home earlier, spending more time in the sunroom where Mara often sat with the baby, asking questions, listening to her answers, learning who she was beneath the surface. One evening, 2 months after the baby was born, Charles asked Mara to join him in his study, said he needed to discuss something important. Mara's heart raced. She thought he was going to tell her it was time to leave, that the arrangement had run its course. But Charles did not ask her to leave. Instead, he told her he had been thinking, that he had consulted with his mother, and that they wanted to offer Mara something more permanent. Not just a position in the household, but a place in the family. He explained that Evelyn had been adamant, that she believed Mara belonged with them, that the baby belonged with them, that Alina needed Mara, that he needed Mara, not as an employee, but as someone who mattered, someone who had changed their lives in ways they were only beginning to understand. Charles told Mara he wanted to set up a trust fund for her daughter, ensure she had access to education, healthcare, opportunities, and he wanted to help Mara pursue her own dreams. If she wanted to return to nursing school, he would pay for it. If she wanted to work, he would support her. If she wanted to stay home and raise her daughter, he would make sure she never had to worry about money again. Mara stared at him, speechless, overwhelmed. She asked why. Why would he do this? What did he want in return? Charles hesitated. Then he admitted the truth, that he had spent 3 years running from grief, building walls, protecting himself from ever feeling that kind of pain again. But that Mara had walked into their lives and reminded him what it meant to be human, to be vulnerable, to let people in even when it terrified you. He said that saving Mara would not bring his wife back, but that maybe, just maybe, it would help him become the father Alina deserved, the man his wife had believed he could be. Mara did not know what to say, so she simply nodded, accepted. And when she left Charles's study, she felt something she had not felt since before her mother died. She felt hope. Evelyn was waiting for her in the hallway. She smiled, took Mara's hands in hers, and told her something that made Mara's eyes fill with tears. She said that family was not always about blood, that sometimes the people who mattered most were the ones you chose, the ones who chose you, and that from this moment forward, Mara and her daughter were family. Mara's daughter is 4 years old now. Her name is Grace, and she has grown up in a home filled with love, with laughter, with people who see her, who protect her, who believe in her. Alina is 9, still Grace's best friend, still her protector. The two of them run through the gardens together, build forts in the living room, whisper secrets under blankets, and Mara watches them with a gratitude so deep it sometimes takes her breath away. Charles remarried last year, not to Mara, but to a woman he met through work, a kind woman, a strong woman, someone who understood grief, who did not try to replace what he had lost but helped him build something new. And Mara was happy for him, genuinely happy, because she understood that some stories are not about romance. They are about redemption, about second chances, about finding family in unexpected places. Evelyn is still there, still the heart of the home, still the woman who reminds everyone that love is not something you earn. It is something you give. Mara returned to nursing school 2 years ago. She graduates next spring, and she has already been offered a position at the hospital where Grace was born, where her life changed, where she learned that sometimes the people who save you are the ones you save first. What would you have done if you were Mara, standing alone in the world with life growing inside you? Would you have had the courage to keep going? To trust again? To believe in hope regardless of what is happening? And what would you have done if you were Charles? If a stranger saved your child and you had the power to change her life, would you have taken the risk? Would you have let her in? Let us know in the comments. Tell us your thoughts. Tell us how this story made you feel. And if it touched your heart, if it reminded you that grace exists even in the darkest places, then like this video. Share it. Subscribe so you never miss another story like this one. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. And remember, you never know whose life you might change with a single act of kindness. We will see you in the next one.